Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on just some DCTV and, I don't know, I don't want to say speculation based, but, just a discussion, I guess. Now, of course, as most of us should know, Superman is really the focus across DC as a whole at the moment in both the film side of things as well as the TV or television side of things. We have Superman Legacy that starts filming in the next couple of weeks, so there are a lot of eyes on that, whether that is, specifically in the DC side of things or just the film side of things as a whole, because Superman, new movie, it's always going to be big. And then, of course, when it comes to DC TV, Superman Lois is heading into its fourth and final season, is really the only main DC stuff for TV that we'll be getting this year. Of course, there is Creature Commandos, but that's very niche across a couple of different things like animation, R-rated, streaming, not necessarily kicking off the new DC reboot, so it's very niche. So Superman Lois probably stands above in regards to the DC TV side of things, because I don't think the Sandman comes out this year. At least I don't think it does. But of course, just over 4 years ago from now, we had the ending of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover event on the CW. I'm not sure if it does feel like it was that long ago. I mean, time runs weird now after we had those events in 2020, but yeah, I don't know. It feels closer than that, but also I can see the 4-year gap. But one of the big things that happened in that crossover event was the return of Brandon Routh as his version of Superman, which in itself is a continuation of the Christopher Reeve Superman as well. Now, this reprisal was a take on the Kingdom Come Superman, specifically the events relating to Superman leading up to the point that we meet him. But as we end the Crisis crossover, like in that montage, I guess you could say, after the multiverse is reborn, we see this version of Superman is, back to having a more classic Superman look and just looking more hopeful as a whole. Now, since this point, many have wanted to see more of this version through a spin-off or something like that, or even just appearing on one of the shows when the Arrowverse was still, alive and well. And while this video isn't relaying any news about a confirmation for a show or a spin-off or anything like that, we did get some stuff from Mark Guggenheim, who of course was a showrunner for Arrow and all that previously, but more importantly in regards to this, he was essentially the showrunner for the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. Like, he was the main guy piecing it all together and getting people to come into it and everything like that. And he was asked on Twitter if he had any more cool promo shots of Brandon Routh in his Superman suit from Crisis. A pretty simple question, and he did provide these. You can see them on screen right now. These, of course, are very cool. Now, I think most would agree that this is not only one of the cooler looking live action superhero suits, whether that is across film or TV, but also just really accurate. It's accurate, but it also just works in live action. It doesn't look goofy. But then again, that might be Brandon Routh making it look good and making it work. I'm not too sure, but it looks cool regardless. But it was when someone asked something in response to this. Well, it wasn't really asked. It was more expressed what they wanted to happen. But they essentially replied to Mark Guggenheim saying they wish that the character of this Superman that Brandon Routh played could get a miniseries of sorts, following on from the last moment we see him in Crisis. And Mark replied to that saying, "Brandon and I have talked about a sequel series. We have some really exciting ideas." Now, if we're being completely honest here, this really isn't news. And you might be wondering, hold on, what? What are you talking about? Well, some of you might remember that we did go over a report a few years ago, whether it was, you listened to me talk about it or just heard it elsewhere. I think it might have been during the COVID break where everything was just closed down, or it might have been the months after that when things started to get back to some sort of normality. It might have been after, because Crisis only ended just before that whole thing happened, so if anything it might have happened a couple of months after. But there was a report out there that Brandon Routh had met with WB-TV or Warner Brothers TV executives about doing a follow-on series of sorts. I think Mark Guggenheim might have been included in the report, and I think also Greg Berlanti from memory. But the thing is, nothing really happened after that, though Brandon himself had aligned with this actually happening without confirming it happened at the same time when people spoke to him at conventions and stuff following it. Of course, it's been 3 years since that point, so he's been asked a few times. But once again, he didn't confirm it. He was I'm not going to deny it at the same time either. But with Mark bringing this up and throwing the likelihood probabilities to the side, if you want to put it, what could a sequel series for this character look like? Now, one of the ones that a lot of people have brought up, and it was in the replies to that tweet where, Mark had brought up, oh yeah, we've had conversations about it and everything like that. The one that a lot of people brought up was All-Star Superman. Now, I think this is the one that would actually really, really suit this Superman. Now, we know that All-Star Superman, weirdly, it is a bit of a weird inspiration, but it is going to be an inspiration for Superman Legacy. You know, DC's noted it down as the main inspiration. A lot of the artwork that James Gunn has shared has been from it, but it's also a story about a Superman that's about to die and is in his last sort of days, if not hours, and stuff like that. So I think you could do that with this version of Superman, but I don't know if you want Superman to die. I'd rather it just be like a climax thing where maybe the world that he lives in is like not necessarily like overrun with these super villains and super criminals and stuff like that, and he's more just showing the good-hearted, good side of Superman, but with also a bit of a villainous aspect there as well. But nothing that's like, oh, that this villain's killing people and stuff like that. It just could be this like underlying threat that Superman has to deal with, but it's also more of a story about, you know, the good side of Clark Kent and Superman and his humanity, and that's how you would do it. But yeah, as I said, a lot of people were sort of expressing their interest in that sort of being an inspiration in the comments or the replies, might I say, of that tweet. And I've heard it since that point as well, that All-Star Superman would be like a perfect story for this kind of Superman, which I definitely agree with. Another option is just an original story. Maybe using like a more obscure Superman villain or just overall DC thread. As I've said, like this version that we met in Crisis was the Kingdom Come version, but like then we moved on from that and the multiverse was a bit reborn, so things didn't, I guess, happen the way they did, where it led to that version of Superman being there. So you'd assume Lois Lane's still alive, Jimmy Olsen's still alive, everything like that in this world this Superman's now in. So you don't necessarily have to do this original take following Kingdom Come, what happens next. You can just, you know, make your own original Superman story, whether it is with an original villain or just an obscure villain. But I wouldn't mind an obscure villain rather than just having, oh, it's Lex Luthor again. Oh, it's Brainiac. Like, you know, you could have a bit of fun with it and be a bit creative. But I think original story would probably be the most likely thing you would do with this if this was ever to happen in, like, as I said, if you like suspended belief and just put the likelihood probabilities to the side. I think an original story is probably the way to go, but it doesn't necessarily mean an original villain. It just means like something that's not adapting a comic, like adapting All-Star Superman would be. And speaking of comics, that's actually the final option, and that's a comic series. Now, to me, this is the most likely option out of them all. I could 100% see this happening. Doesn't mean it's gonna happen, but I could see it happening in some way as like a, you know, 8 to 10 issue miniseries or something like that. Now, the reason I go with this is for two options, or for two reasons, might I say. The first, you know, we see it with Smallville, we see it with some other shows as well, whether it is actually, you know, specifically DC or, you know, other shows. I think like Buffy and Angel had like comics. Then of course Smallville had comics. That's the most, you know, the DC relevant one. I guess Superman relevant one as well. And also there's like tie-in comics when a show is currently going as well. So a comic series for one reason makes sense because there's examples of it in the past. The second reason is Mark Guggenheim himself. He's a comic writer. So if he had this idea for a series revolving around this Superman that he thought, yeah, this is the way to go, you can do the artwork and make it look like Brandon Routh's version, he'd probably have a decent chance of like pitching it and getting it picked up, especially if it was like an 8 to 10 issue miniseries and there wasn't this expectation of, oh, you have to sell X amount of things to keep it going and the story is contained, so you know you're going to end it. So to me, that sounds like the most logical thing. Now, in regards to what the comic could contain, it could literally contain that original story that we were talking about before that, you know, potentially could have been like a live action TV show. Now, of course, you're not going to do a take on All-Star Superman or All-Star Superman because, I mean, it's already a comic, you know what I mean? You're going to probably do the original thing. Now, Smallville did it as like a continuation after the show ended, and it was more like they really got to play with it, like stuff they weren't allowed to use in the show, like Justice League, Batman, Flash, all those characters. They were really allowed to have a lot of fun with it. But with this one, I think you just really adapted. They have like that real decent idea for an original story. You can just put it in a comic form, and I'd read the hell out of it. It sounded pretty interesting to me, and you could just sort of imagine it in live action with that version from, well, I guess the version from the end of Crisis played by Brandon Routh, playing the character. You can maybe even involve some Arrowverse stuff in there as well. Like maybe Grant Gustin's Flash pops over and it's like, hey, I'm just traveling the multiverse a bit, got a bit lost, need any help? You could do some fun stuff like that, or set up versions of those other characters like Flash and stuff, maybe Batman, Green Lantern, whatever you want to do on this Earth, and just see what maybe Christopher Reeves' version of Superman, you know, what he would have played around with. Would have been, I guess I think they made it canon that it was Michael Keaton's Batman that was on his Earth. I think they might have, but then they change it up and just do multiverse timey-wimey stuff and then have some fun with it. And, you know, it's a bit of a clean slate for them to play with. But I think a comic series is definitely the most likely option if there was any of a chance of this happening. But as I said before, I think this might align with those initial reports back from whether it was 2020 or 2021, whichever way it was, that there were discussions that were happening. But of course, a lot has changed since that point in more ways than one. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comment section down below your various thoughts and everything we went over in this video. Would you like to see this, whether it is a live action TV show or even a comic thing? And do you have any ideas story-wise? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.